Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of Burns Banter, the podcast that takes a fresh look at the life and works of Robert Burns, hosted by myself, Alistair Turnbull. In this episode, we're going to look at a poem called Willie Wastle, which is also known as Sick a Wife as Willie Had. Now, I'm going to play you a recording that I made a couple of weeks ago in Mauchline of this poem. I recorded it at a pub called Pussy Nancy's, which is a pub that Robert went to quite a lot when he was in Mauchline. After I played that, we're going to go through the poem and I'll tell you all the Scots words, what the meanings are, where they came from. And towards the end, we might even find out who Willie Wastle is, where he came from, and how the poem was written, possibly. So let's dive right in and listen to the recording of the poem. Okay, now we're in a place that Robert Burns used to come to in Mauchline, and I'm inspired by this room which is authentic to the time of Burns. Burns may have been sitting in this room 250 years ago, we don't know, sitting by this very fire. And I'm going to read a poem to you called Willie Wastle. I've chosen this one because my dad used to say it to me, and he used to take great pleasure in saying the line, "Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her." I remember him saying that quite clearly. So I'm going to recite the poem to you just now. Willie Wastle dwelt on Tweed, the spot they called it Lincoln Doddy. Willie was a Wabster gid, could stone a clue with onybody. He had a wife, was dour and done, old Tinker Major was her mother. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. She has an E, she has but one. The cat has twa the very colour, 5 rusty teeth for by a stump. A clapper tongue would deave a miller, and whiskin beard a booter mouth. Her nose and chin, they threaten one another. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. She's bow-hocket, she's hem-shinned, ane limping leg, a hand-breed shorter. She's twisted right, she's twisted left, to balance fair and ilka quarter. She has a hump upon her breast, the twin o' that upon her shoulder. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. Old Bodderins by the ingle sits, wi' her loof, her face a washing. But Willie's wife is nae sae trig, she dicts her funsy wi' a hussin'. Her wally neaves like mitten creels, her face would file the Logan water. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed recording it. I enjoyed my time in Mauchline. That pub, Pussy Nancy's, is only about 2 or 3 miles along the road from Mossgiel Farm, which is where Robert lived and worked for a number of years, and he wrote poems such as To a Moose. A good time I had there. Right, the words to Willie Wastle are quite difficult, and I'm going to go through them just now. So the first bit, the first verse is, Willie Wastle dwelt on Tweed, which means Willie Wastle lived on by the River Tweed. The spot, they called it Lincoln Doddy. Lincoln Doddy was, or some people say that Lincoln Doddy is just a made-up place, but others say that Lincoln Doddy was the name of a thatched cottage that was just by the River Tweed, just across from where the Logan Water, which is a tributary to the River Tweed, joined onto the river. And it's also just about 2 miles from a place called the Crook Inn, which is where Robert used to stay when he was travelling between Dumfries and Edinburgh. He stayed there a number of times, it's quite well documented. So that's where Lincoln Doddy is. Willie was a Wabster good. Willie was a weaver. He's a weaver, and it means he's a good weaver. Could stow a clue with anybody. I think that's something to do with weaving, but it could also mean could steal a clue with anybody, but I'm not sure about that one. He had a wife was dour and din. Dour and din just means, crab it, really annoying, kind of dark persuasion of, just walks about with a cloud above her head. Old Tinker Major was her mother. That basically means the head of the gypsies was her mother. Sick a wife as Willie had, such a wife as Willie had, that means I wouldn't gie a button for her. Basically, I wouldn't touch her with a barge pole. She has an E, she has but ane. I mean, she has an eye, she has but one eye. The cat has twa, the cat has two the very colour. 5 rusty teeth for by a stump, that's fairly self-explanatory. A clapper tongue would Diva Miller. A clapper tongue means a really loud voice, and would Diva Miller means would deafen a miller, which is quite a big insult because millers worked in very loud mills. It was, they were used to loud noises. A whiskin beard about her moo just means she had a moustache and hair on her chin. Her nose and chin they threaten either. Her nose was long and her chin was long and they almost touched together. That's what that means. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. She was bow hocket and hem shinned. Now, bow hocket means bandy-legged. And hem shinned means she had crooked shins. Where do we go on to after that? She's twisted right, she's twisted left. The balance fair in ilka quarter. Means her spine was all twisted, she had a big nose, all that kind of thing. She had a hump upon her breast, basically a big lump there. The twin of that upon her shoulder, she had another hump on her shoulder. Such a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't touch her with a barge pole. The last verse, old Bodderins by the ingle sits. Now, old Bodderins is just an old cat, and an ingle is a fire. So the old cat by the fire sits, and with her loof, her face a-washing. That means the cat is licking its paw and gently washing its face in a very graceful manner. So yeah, and with her loof, her face a-washing. That's the cat gently washing its face with its paw. And the next line is, but Willie's wife is nae sae trig, means she's not as nice. She dichts her frunzy wi' a hushin'. Now, dicht means wipe. Her frunzy is her nose, and a hushin' is a sleeve. So basically he's saying she wipes her nose with her sleeve, just right in front of everybody. It's just disgusting. The next line, her wally neaves like midden creels. Now, wally neaves are just really big fists, big ham fists is a wally neave. And a midden creel is a basket that you carry a manure in. But back in the day, they had animals, they had to clear up the manure, put it in a basket, take it to the fields, empty it out, use it as fertiliser. So he's saying her big ham hands were as big as baskets full of manure, is what he's saying there. Her face would file the Logan water. File means foul. Her face is so ugly it would turn the water sour, is what he's saying there. Sick a wife as Willie had, I wouldn't gie a button for her. Basically, he did not like Willie's wife. Put it that way. Let's look at the reasons behind this poem. Why was it written? There's several chains of thought about why this poem was written. Some people think it's a political rant that we know nothing about. I mean, something that happened that's been lost to history, and Robert's written this satirical poem about a political situation. I don't agree with that. I would rather believe, and there's some historical credibility for this, that it's actually about a woman, right? Now, Robert used to travel back and forward from Edinburgh to Dumfries, and he used to stay at a place called the Crook Inn. Now, the Crook Inn is just a couple of miles away from an old thatched cottage that sat on the edge of the River Tweed, just directly across where the Logan Water, a tributary to the River Tweed, joins it. In that cottage, At the time that Burns was travelling about that area, lived a guy called Gideon Thomas. Now, history is a bit quiet on whether Gideon had a wife or not. It's not actually written down. It's written down that Gideon Thomas lived in this cottage. It was called Lincoln Doddy, and it was 2 miles from the Crook Inn. What I think has happened, and this is just my personal belief, Burns has been staying in the inn, travelling back and forward between Dumfries and Edinburgh. Gideon Thomas has come in with his wife. Now, whether she was hideous or not, I think she's probably annoyed Burns, because Burns has got a bit of a history of writing poems about women in a very derogatory manner if they have annoyed him. Right? If they have really annoyed him, he basically rips them apart in prose. So I've got a funny feeling that Gideon Thompson came in with his wife. Gideon was probably quite a good laugh, had a drink with Burns and all the rest of it. And his wife was saying, like, come on, we've got to go home and it's time to go and leave that blooming poet alone and let's go. I think that Burns, in a sort of drunken state or just to reprimand her, has written this poem, Willie Wassell's wife. Now, he's used the name Willie Wastle to hide the fact that it's Gideon Thomas's wife, maybe. I mean, the name Willie Wastle actually comes from a children's rhyme. It was a game that children used to play back in the late 1700s. A boy would be beside like a den. He would be defending the den. He'd be called Willie Wastle. There'd be a border to the den, and other boys would come up to the edge of the border, and they would shout the rhyme, Willie Wastle, I'm at your castle. And the guy playing Willie Wastle would have to grab the boys and drag them over the boundary. They would then become Willie Wastle. The other guy would get away. It's just an old children's game, so he's used this name. So Willie Wastle didn't actually exist. The children's game got it from a thing that happened in the late 1600s when Oliver Cromwell's army besieged a castle in Roxburgh. It was Hume Castle, I think it was called. And it was actually who? The governor of Hume Castle was a guy called Colonel John Coburn, who said to the two guys, the two colonels that Cromwell had sent, I don't know who Cromwell is, get away, leave me alone. And he sent this rhyme to them. He said, I, Willie Wastle, stand firm in my castle, and all the dogs in your toon will no poo Willie Wastle doon. Unfortunately, the two colonels then bombarded the hell out of the castle and basically turned it to rubble. But that's where the name Willie Wastle comes from. It comes from history. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I hope you understand more about the poem Willie Wastle, where it came from. I hope you understand more of the Scots words and therefore can enjoy more of the poem. So until I see you next time, Slán Java.